In this lesson, we will evaluate absolute value expressions and we'll solve absolute value equations. So what is absolute value? Absolute value is the distance from zero. So if you look here, this is 0 on the number line. Absolute value is how far to the right and how far left can go. So the absolute value of -4, for instance, is 4, because -4 is 1, 2, 3, 4 steps from 0. Now, the absolute value of 4 is also 4. Why? Because the number 4 is 1, 2, 3, 4 steps from 0. So absolute value is always positive, because distance, if I'm going to walk this direction and walk this direction, it always counts. It's always going to be positive. So the answer to what is the absolute value of 5 actually is 2 answers. What 2 numbers are 5 steps from 0? -5 and 5. And if you wanted to look at that on a number line, you could. So when solving equations with absolute value, we always have 2 cases. We need to consider that the value is positive, and we need to also consider that the value is negative, because absolute value goes both directions. So in this case, I just need to solve by plugging and chugging here. So m is 4, so I plug that in, so it's 4 plus 6 inside absolute value. Order of operations, we consider the absolute value sign as parentheses, so you have to do those first. So 4 plus 6 is 10. So guys, what's the absolute value of 10? How far is 10 from 0? It's positive 10. So we subtract 14 and we get -4. So that's our result from this expression. How about here? X is 2, and we're going to plug that in. So I have 23 minus the absolute value of 3 minus 4 times 2. Well, 4 times 2 is 8. So this is absolutely the absolute value of 3 minus 8. 3 minus 8 is -5. So you have to ask yourself, how far is -5 from 0? 5 steps. So this is 23 minus 5, which is 18. So your value is 18. There are 3 types of sentences involving absolute value. When we have an absolute value of a number equal to n, when we have an absolute value less than n, and we have an absolute value greater than n. Well, all we're going to worry about in this lesson is equality. So the absolute value of 4, what 2 numbers are 4 steps from 0? Well, we have to consider the negative case and then consider the positive case. -4 is here. Do you remember our number line? 4 is here, and they're both 4 steps from 0. So in all absolute value equations, you have to consider both cases. The expression is positive and the expression is negative. So the absolute value of 10 would be 10 and -10. So in this situation, I'm going to solve 2 cases. When f plus 5 is equal to positive 17 and when f plus 5 is equal to -17. Do you see what I just did? I took this equality statement, and because I see absolute value signs, I have to have a positive result and a negative result. Now we solve. Subtract 5, and I get f is equal to 12. Subtract 5, and I get f is equal to, if we add this together, because they're both negative, it'd be 23, -23. So your solution is -23 and 12. Okay? What would we do here? Well, this is already a negative, and if you will look, can absolute value ever be negative? No. Absolute value is always positive. If I walk 3 steps backwards, I still took 3 steps. So the absolute value is still positive 3. So this is what we would call an empty set. How do you know if there's going to be an empty set in this lesson? You're going to have a negative after an absolute value. That's an empty set. The temperature of an enclosure for a pet snake should be about 80 degrees Fahrenheit, give or take 5 degrees. Here's our absolute value. We have to be 5 degrees to the left of 80 and 5 degrees to the right of 80. So we want to find the maximum and the minimum temperatures. So here's 80, our midpoint, and we've got to go 5 to the left, which would be 75, 5 to the right, which would be 85. So what is our maximum? Maximum, 85 degrees. What is our minimum? 75 degrees. And our midpoint was that 80 because we went 5 to the left, 5 to the right. Now, graphing absolute value, we can write an equation when we're given just a graph. So you need to find the midpoint first. Well, if you look at these 2 points, the midpoint, if I count in, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 steps. So the midpoint would be 3 in, 1, 2, 3. This is my midpoint. How far are we from that midpoint? 1, 2, 3 steps to the right, 1, 2, 3 steps to the left. So this is going to be our absolute value. And then what we put inside here is this midpoint is 6, so we write x minus 6. We have just written an equation from a graph. Let's do one more because I know we need to practice this. Find the midpoint first. Here's 11, here's 19. That means there's 8 in between, so we're going to go 4 steps. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's our midpoint. So there's 4 here because we just counted them. 1, 2, 3, 4 here. So what is that for? Our absolute value. Now obviously we're just going to use x again. Our midpoint here is 12, 13, 14, 15. So that's going to be our number that goes here. And since it's a positive 15, we make this a minus. Follow along in your notes. Follow the guide in your notes if you need help with writing equations from a graph.